Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I see we have folks from all around the world, so whatever part of the day it is for you, hope you're having a good day. We welcome you to join this panel. It's something very exciting that we're glad to have you join into. The one thing I'd like to remind everyone, I know a lot of people have been using the chat facility. However, if you want to ask a question, it would be best if you could submit your questions using the Q&A feature to introduce those, and then we will be reading that Q&A and then we'll be dishing out the questions to the various panelists. The other thing I would ask, and this is just as a reminder to the panelists, please do keep your video off and your audio off when you're not actually an active part of the panel. Once your panel begins, you would be welcome to then keep those both on, and then we'll keep them on until we're wrapping up each of the two panels. In fact, that brings me to the two points. We have two panels today. The first panel is really one that focuses on the traveler experience and how that is going to change with safe and seamless travel technologies. And then the second one focuses on those key enablers, the technologies themselves, as well as other types of enablers from policy to standards and so on that will be important in driving this progress. This really is the culmination of over 2 years of collaboration between WTTC and Oliver Wyman that ultimately resulted in a report which we released last December. The work was done in collaboration also with other critical associations, ICAO, IATA, World Economic Forum, ACI, and so on. Obviously, in the last year, we all know that COVID-19 has become an important catalyst for change in these areas. Passengers and travelers in general are changing their expectations in terms of their willingness to come into physical contact with other people, with surfaces, and so on. And so touchless technologies really minimize that contact and make it the whole journey safer for the traveler, but also for the employees that we have working in the sector. Touchless solutions enabled through biometrics and digital identities are not a new thing. They already exist within the travel journey. This is really an opportunity for us to build on and aggregate existing solutions from biometric verification to e-gates at airports, to contactless payment technologies and so forth, to enhance the traveler journey and address these new concerns around capturing health data and contact tracing. All of these concepts are part of the Safe and Seamless Traveler Journey Initiative. So hopefully you will get a lot out of this session today and you sort of know where we're going. I'd like to introduce Gloria Guevara at this point. She's going to open us up with some introductory remarks. Gloria joined WTTC in August of 2017 following a varied career in travel and tourism. She was recognized as one of the most influential women in Mexico by CNN and Expansión, and Gloria has been working in the travel industry since 1995. Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you, Scott. Great to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I see that we have a very global audience and we're thrilled to be able to share this knowledge and expertise. Let me just, first of all, thank Oliver Wyman, especially Scott and Mike, because this is a roadmap that we established, as he mentioned, back in 2017 and in 2018, we partnered. And after a lot of work and collaboration with Oliver Wyman, the report was as possible. I also want to thank the members that participated. A lot of people were part of this, and of course, the officials. 2019, if we move to the next slide, please, probably was the best year for travel and tourism globally. As you will see here in the numbers that we have presented over and over, we broke the record in many different areas. Our sector contributed to 10% of the global GDP. We grew faster than the economy, 40% faster. That's what our GDP for travel and tourism grew 3.5 versus 2.5. 1 in 10 jobs were supported. And when you look at all the data, we had more than 1 billion people at certain point closing borders, more than 4 billion people flying somewhere around the world. And yet it was a fantastic year, but it was a year also with some challenges in terms of mobility and the seamless experience. If you move to the next, please. In 2017, when I joined the organization, we asked all of our CEOs and members, what were the 3 things that they were keeping them up at night? The 3 challenges that they thought that they were very important for our sector. And it was interesting because back in 2017, we established this strategic framework. As you can see here, one of the top 3 challenges or concerns that we had was the security and travel facilitation. How do we make sure that we grow and we maintain the security and the facilitation in travel throughout the world? The second one was interesting, was all the things related with crisis preparedness and management, and of course recovery. And we're living the worst crisis of our history with the pandemic. But it was interesting because we anticipated, we produced a report, and that's why we have a lot of data also and a lot of information, because we knew that this was just a matter of time. And we were trying to make the point about the importance of preparedness. And third one, of course, equally important, is sustainable growth. That has to do with climate, with environment, but also with the social impact of tourism and destinations and communities, and the things related to reducing and eliminating human trafficking and illegal wildlife trade, just to mention some of those. Now, going back to security and travel facilitation, as this was a concern, we established one of the priorities to be seamless travel journey program. And we believe that now the digital agenda has been accelerated, and also we need to pay attention to visa facilitation and all of that. In the seamless travel journey, the initiative started, we launched that in 2017. And as Scott mentioned, we partnered with Oliver Wyman to document all the information and work with all the experts around the world and bring everyone together to understand what was our situation and also what was needed. So we work with over 350 travel industry experts, different technology players, government leaders, and we have multiple workshops around the world that Lena Bononi helped us to champion with Scott and Mike and the different people from Oliver Wyman around the world. We were able to identify over 80 different biometric initiatives within our industry, because it's very important to say that in this case, the solutions were implemented before we had a common understanding. And we had, for that reason, multiple solutions. Now, the good news is that for all those countries that have been investing, it is very clear that they are going to be in a better position in the recovery, because the digital agenda has been accelerated, and it's very important now to include that health component in the seamless, or what we called back then, the seamless, that now we call safe and seamless travel journey. Now, we also work with governments and the G20. And I have to say, we're very pleased that under the leadership of Saudi Arabia, they included the seamless and safe travel journey, or SSTJ, as part of the agenda of the G20. This was the first time ever. We tried to include this since the 2018 G20, but it was quite of a challenge. But we're very happy that the government of Saudi Arabia was very receptive, and also the members of the G20. And it made it to the declaration, where the leaders endorsed the G20 guidelines for action on safe and seamless travel, and welcome also the working group that it was established. I have to also acknowledge the support from OECD, because they were instrumental in helping us in defining some of these guidelines with our input and all the information that we gathered in the last years. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the report. And I don't want to take a lot of your time, because you will hear firsthand from the experts. But this was an unprecedented global effort. And the effort is very important, because we want to make sure that we adopt and also innovate and these digital technologies we believe are going to enable seamless experience. This was needed in the time of growth, and now is needed in the time of the recovery. in the report that Scott mentioned that we released back in December, has very specific recommendations and best practices that I invite you to take a look, to understand, to read. It's a very comprehensive report that it has a lot of information. But very important, reach out to all the experts that contribute to the report as well, so that you can better understand the solutions that they offer. The recommendations are aligned in 5 different principles. One is the public and private collaboration. That is crucial for the success of this initiative. And we have seen that in countries that have moved faster than others, where they work as one, and that partnership is unprecedented. And you will hear from some of those leaders today. Data collection and sharing is also crucial. Data privacy, interoperability is one of the requirements. And of course, very important, customer first by design. We need to have the traveler at the center, and that's key. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of the global guidelines, the adoption of these innovative and digital identity technologies is very important to highlight. First, the industry landscape. And this was something that it was shared with the G20, as mentioned before. We're very pleased that we were able to partner with Saudi Arabia. They believe in this topic. And now we're working with Italy, that, by the way, is the new chair for the G20. And they also believe in the seamless and the travel experience and the importance of using solutions such as biometrics. The industry landscape, as I say, there are a lot of solutions out there that will help us to use biometrics and the digital identity. And these can help to overcome the issues that we have with COVID. Now more than ever, the consumers are expecting to have these contactless solutions, contactless technologies as a prerequisite. So as I said before, the countries that have invested already in biometrics, they are a step ahead than the rest. They already have a competitive advantage. And it's very important to help the other countries and the airports and the airlines and the entire travel chain to implement these solutions so that we can recover faster. The report also talks about some recommendations, some best practices. And this is very important because the interoperability is one of the requirements. We always talk about that we are agnostic. There are so many good solutions out there that we need to understand, and we need to learn more in order to implement them. And we can cover the end-to-end traveler journey from the booking all the way to completing the experience, and that has to be totally seamless. The importance of data analysis, and of course, privacy. Privacy is key from our end, is very important, and the data should be used for the benefit of the traveler. That's something that we have been very vocal. And all of our members and the people that are participating in our initiative are totally aligned with the same goal. And the path forward also, we believe that it has to be in a phased approach with concrete steps, with governments, with the industry, associations, and all the different standard setting and bodies that will help us to move faster. Now, let me go to the next slide, please, and cover a little bit about the WTTC key call to action. The first one is that for the private sector is to develop and adopt this innovation, these digital technologies to enable seamless travel and better manage the visitor flows, and also offer a unique experience, contactless, touchless, that would help us to recover faster in our sector due to the challenges that we're living today. There are some protocols that it is clear they probably will go away after COVID, but there are many protocols that will stay. Some things we'll expect and we will see after COVID. So it's very important to use the technology as an enabler to recover faster. And the private sector should be on top of this, using these solutions and enablers, especially with biometrics and the use of technologies. For the public sectors, for the governments, to increase availability and the use of biometrics and digital identities. As I say, this not only helps them to increase security within their borders, it's also helping them to increase experience and have less infrastructure for growth, and also enable legislation and regulations would allow the protection that is needed. So for the public sector, this is a must. The better countries, the most competitive regions in the world, they already have something in place. And that the ones that they haven't implemented biometrics, I'm afraid that they're a little bit behind, and it's very important for them to catch up and they can use that to have a faster recovery. We encourage to continue this public and private collaboration to advocate for the best regulation and the global practices. That's a call of action. And as we have seen in countries, and you will hear today from some of those great examples from governments and officials and experts that will speak in the panels, that collaboration is crucial for the growth and the implementation of such solutions. And then last but not least, promote the foundation of a traveler digital identity. We need to start moving to digital identity so that we can have a better experience, increase security, and have, as I say before, the authentication of the data, and the consumer has to be the owner of that information. So I'll stop right here. Thank you very much for participating in this very important session. As Rachel and Scott mentioned, this is going to be recorded. Part of this material will be used for future also content and events. It is critical that everyone is on board, and more important that we all push for this agenda that finally is happening, and we believe that it's going to start moving pretty fast. Thank you again, and back to you, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. I appreciate the collaboration we've had over the last couple of years. It's a good example of the kind of collaboration that's going to be necessary to bring all of this to fruition. Our next speaker is Mr. Olivier Onidi, who is Deputy Director General of the Directorate General for Migration and Home Affairs at the European Commission, with particular responsibility for security. In this capacity, Mr. Onidi oversees the activities in the fields of terrorism and violent extremism, organized crime, cybersecurity, information systems, and innovations. Olivier, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Scott, and thank you, Gloria, for the initiative. We're very happy once more to express a very strong support to this piece of work, and beyond this piece of work, of course, the initiative of a whole segment of the industry in order to improve travel experience and facilitate actually the mobility of people. And it's never been as urgent to actually do so, given the very poor state of the travel industry these days. We really all have a responsibility to support the travel industry, given the circumstances. At least one thing that came out of the current pandemic is the fact that not only do we have to accelerate our adjustment to a digital world, but we also have to frantically develop some new features. And the one that was raised by both Scott and Gloria, the fact that everyone was looking for smart touchless solution these days is another, I think, very important piece that will hopefully facilitate the chain of events that is currently needed. In our contacts with international partners, public authorities of different regions, we really see that all in their quest to prepare the back to recovery, so to say, post pandemic, are creatively thinking and also investing much more in the promotion of digitalization and touchless tools. So these guidelines come at a perfect moment. I mean, it provides like a fantastic across the board, but also absolute comprehensive set of what needs to be done. And we know that it is supported by all the key actors, ICAO and IATA and others, who will actually help us to make it happen. Of the 5 principles that are described, it will not come as a surprise to you that as public authority, we do believe that the interoperability one and the data protection one are absolutely key. And we thank the authors of this report to have put so much emphasis on this. we've just come out of an immense journey setting up interoperability for all our border management issues, information systems, but also procedures that would apply across the European Union and Schengen. So we know how important it is to define systems, procedures that are open, so that we do not create new islands in the future, the future digital world. Data protection as well, if we want to conquer the trust of the traveling public, we of course have to make sure that the privacy by design is actually conducting and orienting all the steps further. As to the contribution of the European Union, we will continue supporting your quest. I mean, the journey of the WTTC and all the actors here in implementing this seamless and safe travel agenda. We will continue investing in research and innovation. We've massively invested in the last years on automatic border controls, on biometric systems, and also in security devices for travel documents. Now is the time for deployment. We've also given a dedicated responsibility to the European Border Management Agency, Frontex, to actually deploy new, smart, innovative, and of course interoperable solutions across the EU, specifically geared at facilitating the crossing of borders. We have new also systems specifically designed for the digital age, and Krumgarkov in the second panel today will elaborate on the work being done and the type also of solutions we have come with. We are about in spring this year to also propose a concept that would be used across the European Union and Schengen countries, providing an electronic identity to every citizen and hence every traveler as well, which will be, I think, an additional cornerstone to actually facilitate the rollout of digital features and seamless travel solution. And then we will also continue promoting the digitalization of the travel documents themselves, fully in line with what we have adhered to, which are the ICAO specification in the context of the digital travel credentials. And we still admire very much the work that has been done in this context. Two issues I would leave to you as specific issues to keep an eye on, I believe. It is both concern the authentication of the real identity of an individual. We've all improved not only the systems, but also the procedures in order to fill in gaps that we had in terms of false identities being used or individuals crossing our borders without proper authorization or staying in our territory without proper authorization. So this seamless program rests under the assumption that we will also find appropriate solution to guarantee the authentication of the identity of individuals. And in that respect, we should continue looking at the promotion and the active also implementation of the digital certificates. We've seen, despite all the work of ICAO, that in some areas in the world, those have been difficult to actually deploy in order to have proper security as to the readout of the chip, the electronic element of the identification documents. And the second is also making sure that we do have reliable biometric features. If we have in our modernization of rules, lastly, with the visa information system that has been modernized, ensured that registration in the EU is controlled. So pictures are actually taken in accredited, authorized environments, consulate for visas, for example, applicable to all persons, including children, we really need also to base this and have an international guarantee that this is being done in all jurisdictions. Otherwise, we will miss the full outcome and full potential of the electronic features of identities that will be used. So please keep in mind those two aspects. Those are important because we see that we still have some work to do in this context. And again, thank you for the initiative, for also pursuing this with a lot of pugnacity and effectiveness. Many colleagues on our side will be participating and following this event. First and foremost, Sylvia Colleagues, who is our chief person in charge of the modernization of border procedures. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olivier. I really appreciate your comments. We had one question come through that was intended for you, so I'll go ahead and ask it. The person asks about the impending implementation of the EU entry-exit system, which will require third country nationals to be processed through the border using a touch-heavy kiosk and to read passports and capture fingerprints using contact readers. So the question is about whether or not equivalent safer solutions based on smartphones could be used and made just as secure as kiosks. So the question is whether or not you and your colleagues would be considering such processes.
We do. I mean, those new solutions will have to be used if we're serious about making a real difference. The entry-exit system will be in operation as from next year. So by next year, we will unfortunately not be able to deploy those new solutions, but we are actively, with the help of the industry and also our dedicated agencies, whom will say a word about this later on, testing those type of technologies in order to hopefully, as soon as possible, get rid of the physical check that will still be needed in terms of the fingerprints, so that we can even further simplify the procedures.
Great, thank you very much. I think in the interest of time, I know there's some other questions, so we'll probably go ahead and move on, but thank you very much, Olivier. Good answer also to a pretty good question. Thank you. Folks, I wanted to introduce our first panel, which is going to focus on enhancing the traveler experience through new technologies, including biometrics and including touchless traveler technologies and digital traveler IDs. So over the last 2 years, as Gloria mentioned, we've been working together and have identified over 80 initiatives using biometrics in the travel and transportation industry. Among others that we've looked at are the known traveler digital identity from the WEF, Aruba's Happy Flow initiative, and various CBP, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol pilots that are going on with airlines and many others. Obviously, as Olivier and Gloria mentioned, accelerating recovery requires that businesses adapt and fast track these digital transformations to automated services across the traveler journey, including the integration of connected rooms, contactless check-ins, digital car keys, and other technologies. Biometrics is just going to become more and more important. As these technologies leverage biometrics and traveler digital identities, data security and privacy are paramount. As part of the SSTJ, we've been working with data privacy experts to gain valuable insights to support best practice recommendations. Last point, WTTC has also been consulting with these experts because we also know that data privacy is paramount in all of the implementations. Please allow me to introduce our panelists. Today we have with us Ms. Diane Sabatino, from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency. She's the Deputy Executive Assistant Commissioner for the Office of Field Operations. We also have with us Luca Pronzati, who's the Chief Business Innovation Officer for MSC Cruises. Chris McLaughlin, who's Chief Operating Officer for Denver Airport. Miguel Leichtman, CEO of VisionBox, and Brandon Lowther, VP of Cybersecurity for Hilton. So thank you, panelists, for joining us today. And if you could please go ahead and turn on your cameras, and we'll start with everybody on mute, with the exception of you, Diane, because our first question is going to you. Diane, with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection and its biometrics program has really been one of the pioneers and is considered best practice globally. Many pilots and programs exist within airlines, airports, and cruise lines. What is the CBP's vision regarding the future of touchless travel using facial biometrics, and how are facial biometrics further secured and enhanced for air, cruise, and other cross-border travel means?
Well, good morning, and thank you for inviting me to participate in the panel today. With respect to our vision for the future of facial biometrics in our processes, certainly in the short term, we're going to continue to roll out the expansion of the simplified arrival process, as well as work with our industry partners to deploy the exit piece, in partnership with the airlines and port authorities across the country. Had a lot of great success with the rollouts of the program. And, we recognized, I think, in the development of the use of the facial biometrics, I'm not sure that the health measures and the safety measures, with respect to a pandemic, we're at the forefront in that development, but we've certainly recognized how that touchless travel experience could, certainly enhance and build travelers' confidence back in the travel system. So that's something that we're doing in the short term. But certainly in the long term, as you mentioned, we have a number of successful pilots around the country, primarily in partnership with TSA, where we've deployed for TSA check-in pilots, where we see great synergy with the agency, where we can also continue to expand, our projects of using or affording our stakeholders identity as a service. And that's, anywhere from check-in, TSA checkpoint, baggage drop, arrival and departure. As we expand that, it's going to get us one step closer to that touchless end-to-end facial biometric travel journey. Now, in terms of the enhancements I mentioned, with respect to the health, and safety, limiting the transmission of pathogens by requiring individuals to provide fingerprints. It's a significant benefit in that respect. But also, we've automated a manual process that we've been doing for years, that facial verification. Frankly, the technology is much more, I should say, better, at identifying imposters, frankly, than we were as officers in the field. And given, the security, the enhanced security with respect to verifying identity, but also streamlining that process, and providing that world-class traveler experience, and ensuring that our officers have the opportunity to focus on the intent of the intent of the traveler versus the administrative burdens of those manual checks, just overall streamlining to the experience.
Great. Thank you, Diane. I would like to follow up. You mentioned your partnership with TSA and introducing identity as a service. Are there other stakeholder partnerships that are important in supporting your efforts to advance facial biometrics in the travel process, or other partnerships where people are using identity as a service, perhaps more broadly in ways we wouldn't have anticipated?
No, absolutely. We've had a great success in Atlanta. We'll be moving out in some pilot locations to include Detroit as well. Despite the setbacks from COVID-19 and the decrease in passenger travel, we haven't been sitting idly by, and we're going to continue to work with our industry partners, to help rebuild the public's confidence, as I mentioned, in our travel system. And we're going to continue to test technology and deploy, those innovative efforts. But we wouldn't be able to do it without our partners. We need the airlines, the airports, we need TSA, we need the biometric industry representatives to work with us in doing that. But, long before the pandemic, we recognized the value of our partnerships with a variety of stakeholders, including non-government organizations or even academia. But it's these strong partnerships that has enabled us, to deploy certainly the facial biometric, programs so far. But while we're all still faced with, the enormous challenges due to COVID-19, including unexpected funding shortfalls that has impacted everyone, across the industry, there still remains tremendous opportunities for us to work with our partners and test innovative technologies. And that's where the importance of maintaining, those stakeholder relationships is for us. As we, reimagine, the future of touchless travel. While we have this slowdown, we want to be prepared, for the return of that robust traffic when it comes back to the ports here, certainly in the U.S., but also engage with our international partners in our best practices and success stories.
Great. No, thank you, Diane. You mentioned the Atlanta pilot, and is that the Terminal 6, on departure? Facial biometric scan that kind of gets you on the plane. Is that the process you're talking about there in Atlanta?
Well, there's the biometric exit that's rolled out at a number of different locations, but also working with TSA in Atlanta, as well as Delta Airlines in the check-in process.
Okay, great. Okay, I it's been a while since I traveled by air. I traveled through Atlanta a lot, so I didn't realize that it had gone there. Okay, that sounds interesting. Great. Do you see, Diane, things that, have you been collaborating with your counterparts, overseas to introduce some aspects of what you do, or are they borrowing things from you, or vice versa, in terms of, leveraging each other's investments in these technologies?
Certainly, I think, and long before I was in my current position, just the last couple of months, but my predecessor, John Wagner, significant investments in engaging with our partners overseas to ensure, because from, the government aspect of it, making sure that, we understand and leverage what our partners are doing in that federal space, but also, in the private sector, making sure that we're evolving with the models. We're an international, agency ourselves, dealing with, public traveling from all over the world. So it's important for us to make sure that we're engaged, and not operating in a vacuum solely from, the U.S. perspective. But partnering, I think, on the biometric entry exit, certainly sharing our best practices and making sure that the model itself, makes sense, for our partners as well as the, the industry at large.
Great. Thank you very much, Diane. I'm going to switch over to Chris McLaughlin from Denver Airport. Chris, several facial recognition solutions are available for check-in, border crossing, and baggage drop. And of course, that's helpful for travelers who are looking to, reduce their interactions and the contact with, airport crew or customs officials. From an airport perspective, it's got to be complex dealing with these programs and the, the relationship between the airline operators, the government agencies, and the airport operators. With your experience implementing Verifly at Denver, how do you think airports can really enhance the traveler's experience using biometrics?
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that question. And look, before I start, I just want to say, watching all the different people pop up across the screen from around the world, it's really impressive. So we're all in this together. And I think that's really the spirit of what we're talking about today. So from our perspective, pre-pandemic, I would have said what the airport's role across the spectrum would be is to sort of increase the seamlessness and the predictability of the customer's journey. With the pandemic, that really for us turned into how can we control the time and distance elements of that journey? And in particular, can we do it in a touchless way? And I like what you've said in terms of the ecosystem and how the report talks about public-private partnerships. And we certainly recognize at an airport that we truly are in an ours, yours, and ours, and ours, yours, and in all of our environment, where we own some things, our stakeholders own some aspects of the journey, and then there are some that we truly all influence together. Early in the pandemic in Denver, we went and mapped that customer journey, really the way others talk about it, from curb to gate. And in that process, we identified high touch points, and we identified those that we primarily have control over. And we tried to figure out ways that we could influence those areas. For us, the two that really jumped out in our airport were security and our internal train system. And so we sought to develop a program that would allow customers to really take control over their time and distance elements through that experience. How can we ensure that customers can spend as little time as possible with their co-travelers? And how can we ensure that they can stay as far away from their co-travelers wherever possible? And through that, we developed this program called Verifly. Verifly allows customers to make a reservation. It gives them a dedicated security lane and gives them a reduced capacity train car to get from the main terminal out to the concourses. It may seem simple, it may seem complicated, but it was only possible through the collaboration with our stakeholders, with federal government agencies, with state and local agencies, where we all had sort of a vested interest in the success, but there was also pinch points, right? We influence a lot as an airport, but at the end of the day, our customers truly belong to somebody else, I would argue, for the most part. We can influence them, but at the end of the day, they're getting onto an airplane. So we had to do things in a way that made it easy for the airlines to support what we were doing, that made it easy for our stakeholders to support what we were doing, and frankly, allowed government agencies to endorse what we were doing in a way that allowed it to work. Anytime you roll out something new, there's going to be market pressures that work against you. There's going to be operational impacts that are positive and sometimes negative, especially in the early days. And if you build a coalition early, you can ensure success through the process. In our end, as we started to build Verifly, we worked hard to ensure that people understood what we were doing, customers, stakeholders, government agencies. As we implemented it, we communicated often and early with the folks that were impacted. And then finally, as we learned lessons, because we launched this as a pilot, as we learned lessons, we reacted and we made real-time operational changes that allowed the program to ultimately be effective for everybody. We're a couple months away. We've been about 6 months into Verifly, and it's been a great success. And we're a couple months away now from a new pilot, which will build on the foundation of Verifly, and it'll take us to an exciting new level that will allow us to increase further those time, distance, and touchless elements of the passenger journey through the airport.
Great, thank you, Chris. One question I have is, what were sort of your design parameters as you were, implementing Verifly? Were you looking to achieve that 6 foot, separation distance? Were you looking to make sure that people weren't spending more than X minutes, in close proximity to others? What were the parameters you were designing to as you did design that experience?
So sort of yes to all. I mean, and first of all, we built Verifly believing that, as others have pointed out, some aspects of the mitigating measures that we've put in place due to the pandemic, some of those will last and some of those will evolve. So as we built Verifly, we did it in a way that we believed it could stand the test of time. We used a ladder of confidence model that says that early in the pandemic, we had to ensure that we were following sort of all the rules, ensuring 6 feet of distance. Or when I say a socially distant train car, that car was mapped out specifically to allow 6 feet of distance. And we only allow the number of reservations that can fit on that car and still allow for that distance. From a time perspective, we look at the prolonged exposure standards, and we work hard to ensure that we're doing things in a way that keeps people from being subjected to that. But then as we move down this ladder of confidence, and we can improve the way we do things, both from whether that's vaccinations, whether that's testing, and we can maintain evidence of that through the app, we can then begin to expand on the ladder and do things like put more people back on the trains. As we emerge from the pandemic, we certainly can't limit our train cars as we have through the pandemic. So we have to be able to scale.
Great. No, that's super insightful, Chris. Thank you very much. Luca, I'd like to ask you a question now, if we could. Following the pandemic, contactless experiences are going to become more important than ever. And, because who knows, this may not be the last pandemic we see in our lifetimes. So, you're going to have this, increased, let's say, contactless experience. And yet, fundamentally, many of us operate in businesses and in industries where hospitality still has to be a part of the experience. Certainly important for you in the cruise lines. It's got to be important also for folks in the hotel industry. And so, while digital identities and biometrics can enhance the experience and speed up embarkation and disembarkation, how is it that you want to ensure that you don't take the hospitality out of the travel experience and still keep some level of personal interaction for those passengers, those customers who want that, and for whom the circumstances are deemed safe to have those kinds of interactions?
Thank you very much, Scott. First of all, thank you also to WTTC for inviting me to these incredible events. Going back to your question, so basically, yes, we have been seeing how digital has pushed us back to restart our business operation in Europe back in August, when we have been the first contemporary cruise to restart the operation. And also we see right now that we are the only cruise line in the world operating one ship in the Med, with all the circumstances and complexity currently basically on the logistics to move passengers. So technology for us has always played a key role in enabling and elevating the customer experience, while on the other side, obviously improving the efficiency of the processes. So going back to the embarkation, disembarkation, clearly we need to leverage on biometrics and touchless technology as a way of speeding up the process, because in our business, the embarkation and disembarkation is basically the most complicated operation that we need to manage, because we have a very limited time window with big numbers of our guests and customers that we need to move in and out from the ship with the luggages. So, clearly, this is not really something easy to operate, and technology can play a key role. We have been already investing, by the way, on this in the past, but today, with the current situation, basically driven by the COVID pandemic, we see great opportunities for the future to further enhance these kind of processes. We cannot do this alone. There should be an ecosystem, and we are part, and we should be part of this ecosystem with all relevant stakeholders made of private and public, so that we can test and we will be able to deploy an end-to-end process that will be enabled by these kind of technologies as a way of simplifying the experience. On another note, the human touch is always, playing a key role of what we offer to our guests, because we don't need to forget that in our case it's not a commodity, but a cruise, a vacation on a cruise ship is an experience by definition. Is a dream. So we need to be very, very careful on the role that we want to give and to play with technology in really redesign and re-engineering these kind of processes.
Great, thank you. Do you think that there are particular touch points, if you will, that are going to be really important to preserve in the cruise experience?
The cruise experience is quite articulated, and we offer so many different services on board our ships that the human touch is what is making the difference in terms of services and human relationship. At the same time, technology can support and further enhance such kind of experience. But still, there are examples like, for example, the restaurants where really, people want to get in touch with the waiters, with the maitre d', with the people responsible, really to make them, the best out of this experience, while appreciating the different food selection that is available on the ship. Embarkation disembarkation is less about experience, but this is really where we do start the journey with our guests. So if we do it right, the perception of the guest will be all the way down positive up to the end. While if we do something wrong, because for example, we create an unnecessary queue or waiting time and becoming too much complicated, that this will clearly have an impact on the overall customer perception during the cruise.
Great. Thanks a lot, Luca. Brandon, as a guy from the hotel industry, you may have your own reactions to kind of the question I just asked Luca. Do you have a perspective on that?
I do. We have and share some of the same concerns. When you eliminate that human interaction at check-in, you can miss an opportunity to build a relationship with the guest, learn more about what their needs might be during the stay, and as part of Hilton's response, we've actually created some specific working groups within our company to try to balance the demand and interest for kind of the seamless contactless experience with not losing those customer relationships over time.
Great. What are some of the challenges that you encounter when rolling out solutions, allowing guests to bypass traditional check-in procedures? I know, from our discussions that you guys have, very good penetration of kind of the electronic check-in with most of your hotel estate. But what are some of the major roadblocks you believe have to be removed to create more consistent experience across the global estate?
Sure. First, I did want to share my gratitude as well to Gloria, Helena, and you, Scott, and the rest of the WTTC and Oliver Wyman teams for the invitation today and all the efforts that you are expending to improve the traveler experience and strengthen our industry, particularly in this time of crisis. As you mentioned today, Hilton delivers many aspects of a seamless traveler journey at over 5,000 hotels and in about 43 countries. We have what we call digital key, which is our term for an electronic key card that enables you to access your room. At a subset of our hotels, about 4,600, we have a full seamless journey. We refer to this as straight to room, where guests can book, select their room, check in, and then obtain that digital key in a fully digital, fully contactless experience that's enabled by our Hilton Honors phone app. It's easy and accessible today for many travelers. Deploying these capabilities has certainly been a significant undertaking for us. Some of the challenges include, in particular, infrastructure standardization and integration. So, part of the seamless journey for us means all doors, all entry and exit points. So we've had to solve for scenarios such as shared areas of the hotel, like a fitness center or an executive lounge. And we've also had to account for integrations across different technologies, such as elevator systems and car parks that also require access. One notable observation that we've had, clearly, anytime you're deploying or maintaining or supporting hardware at scale, that could present a number of issues. And as we think about some of the exciting opportunities that STJ and digital identities offer, we also need to seek solutions that either do not involve or at least minimize that on-property technology footprint. COVID's impacts, we expect those to linger for some time, and we need to be particularly cautious now and likely for the next several years on the types of investments that we expect our hotel owners to make.
Sure.
Yep. And another challenge that I'd like to note is just the fraud mitigation part. So a common lesson in cybersecurity, really in risk management in general, is that technology is always used in ways that you might not expect. And so when we eliminated the stop at the front desk for an identity check, eliminated the requirement for a payment card swipe. You know, that introduced some undesirable behaviors that you know, we're now having to manage through technology investment.
Got it. Got it. Thank you so much, Brandon. Miguel, I want to make sure we get you in here too. In the seamless traveler vision, we've highlighted the importance of contactless biometric technology as a way of not only improving security, but also health safety. Can you elaborate further as to how biometric solutions can assist the transportation and travel sector's recovery and the role of digital traveler identities? Miguel?
Yes, I can, Scott. Sorry, I was looking for the unmute button. Well, first of all, thank you very much to be part of this session. It's quite interesting information and comments. I think most of the topics have been addressed that also would address this question. Let me try to put a different angle, because most of the times when we speak about biometrics, we tend to speak about identity and identity management, like it's done in border control, where the question which is placed at this moment where a passenger is being checked is, who are you? It's a very different question that you would take if in the ecosystem of a service platform where different stakeholders like the airlines, the airport, it was also mentioned by Chris, if there is more sharing of data, more sharing of information, which is not necessarily identity, but it's information related to that identity, we can bring back the passenger or the citizen into the center of the travel experience. And biometric can be the key element for that. The question is not necessarily who are you, the question can be, are you the one that you claim to be? And these processes we're actually doing all the time in check-in, access to the lobbies, even border control. But those processes doesn't need to take place at the borders or at the check-in process. They can take place at a quite different moment. I can give you other examples. How handy would it be for an airport to know the whereabouts of the potential passengers of this specific day? That information is not being shared. How handy would it be for an airline to know about the whereabouts of the passenger inside the airport to optimize his operations? That's all about biometrics. That's all about seamless. That's all about sharing data and information. Doesn't have to be the identity of each of the passengers. And that seamless shared environment based on biometrics is the key to bring back the control and experience to the passenger a much more fluent way and much more safe and secure. Technologies like biometrics, technologies like touchless are an element, but more important than that is that we find tools, we find environments where all the stakeholders can share at least some part of the information. I welcome the initiative of Diane, like she mentioned, the identity as a service. We think that governments, authorities have that role, all about identity management, but there are much more steps in the experience of a passenger in the journey. And this a proper designed and architectured platform with all the privacy by design measures, but there's a lot of other kind of information that can optimize the experience of the passenger through his journey. And biometrics is just the glue and the access of those data elements. We need to work a little bit more on the ability for the stakeholders themselves share that information, which they consider assets. It's of course, the passenger, the citizen is an asset, or the information about the passenger is an asset for the airport and for the airline and for the hotel chains and for the rental cars. How can we make sure that biometrics supports the exchange of that information so that the experience of the passenger can be much more fluid, safer, quicker? And this is where Visionbox, through the orchestration platform, is very engaged. And I spend more of my time discussing about this rather than on the biometric technology itself.
Great. Thanks a lot, Miguel. I know we are about to lose Ms. Diane Sabatino here, so I wanted to thank her for joining us. And if you had any parting comments, Diane, about who will manage and secure biometric data, we'd love to hear it. But I also know you probably have to drop off in about a minute.
No, and thank you for the question. With respect to privacy, something that we have invested in from the onset of this process. It's baked in, and ensuring that data integrity. Certainly, to Miguel's point, we have been invested in being responsible stewards of data. Beyond the images of individuals, as an organization, but in partnership with both vendors, as well as the industry stakeholders, making sure as new technology comes online, privacy is a legitimate concern of individuals, and making sure that we're forthcoming, reaching out to privacy advocacy groups, making sure that, here, certainly in the States, our legislators are well read in on the investments that we're making, to ensure the integrity of the data and ensure that people have a sense of comfort with the efforts that we're going to, with respect to, protecting their privacy as well. But thank you so much, and look forward to, future dialogues on the topics.
Thank you kindly, Diane. Really appreciate your participation. Great. Guys, I'd like to maybe ask Chris another question here. How do you see the airport ecosystem collaborating with off-airport stakeholders in the future as it relates to biometrics and digital identities?
That's a great question. Earlier I talked about the airport as an ecosystem, but really we do recognize that we're just one piece. So I'll tell you that already today we are collaborating off airport. So again, I mentioned our Verifly program earlier, which is essentially a first steps, at least, towards a true digital identity. And with that, we're partnering already with car services. We're partnering with hotels. And when I say we, I should say Verifly is a partnership between my airport and a private company, Dayon. And so really they are partnering with this larger ecosystem. But what we know is the traveler journey is difficult for people. And so from the privacy of my couch before I leave, how much of my journey from ordering food to a car service to checking in at my hotel, how much of that can I do in the peace and quiet of my home, preparing me for a seamless journey all the way from couch to hotel, across every aspect, where the airport is a big part of it, but it's only one part of it.
Okay, great. Brandon, another question for you. You mentioned that you have potential fraud issues and certain kinds of things that you're seeing as soon as you introduce a technology. You find people using it in ways you didn't expect and probably didn't want. Is there anything surprising that you would share with us about how that works? And then secondly, in the countries where there are compliance issues with respect to having photocopies of passports and things like that, we've all checked into a hotel in a certain European countries where they want to immediately take a photocopy of your passport. How do you guys see that changing over time? So I guess it's kind of a two-part question. One is the fraud issues you mentioned, and the second is places where you've got to get that photocopy of passports. How is that? How are governments changing some of those policies?
Sure. So our fraud capability continues to expand, and we've really focused on using anonymous pattern type data about our guests' bookings, check-in, payment cards, to really evaluate what types of stays are fraudulent, and then feed that information back in to improve our machine learning models. So I don't know that there's been any surprises, other than once we deployed it, we did see until our capability kind of matched, caught up, right? We did have a period of time where we were actively managing the fraud. Now that's come down, and we've really been able to sustain that at an acceptable level for quite a while. To your second question, the differences in check-in requirements across regions are certainly an inhibitor to us providing that full seamless experience. In some cases, we can still provide the digital key aspect once the check-in process is complete, but that end-to-end, booking to walking into your room, is sometimes dependent and disrupted by specific government regulations or the requirements of the locale. Those conversations, are ongoing. I don't expect here in the kind of COVID era, material changes, across the countries that we operate in.
Okay. So it's a slow process on that front, it sounds like.
Correct.
Greg and Miguel, I'll ask both of you the same question, but kind of in sequence here. Start with you, Greg. How do you see the? Miguel. Apologies, Greg is a different panel. But Miguel, how do you see the traveler experience evolving in the next year, given COVID, and the maturity in biometric and digital identity technology?
Well, it's as it was mentioned earlier, there's a much bigger reasoning behind it now. We were working on the seamless technology and potential market approach in the last years with bigger amount of budgets, but not necessarily a bigger impact in deployment. There was, due to the pandemic, a slowdown, but we are quite back in activities. We are in deployment of different projects in Europe, in Asia, of course, at a much slower rate. But the reasoning behind it and the intention behind it is much stronger than it was before. Not only because of the contacts or contactless or touchless element, is because the whole journey can be much more efficiently implemented. Cases like Schiphol, where we include border control, cases like AirAsia, where we are working on the mobile environments to give the passenger or the citizen a means to travel throughout 170 airports without interacting or touching anything. So it's slower. It's slower, but there's a huge traction in the market right now. And we are in deployment of a number of very interesting and strategic projects around the world at this point of time.
Right. Luca, when you look at the future of biometric identity and how it's shaping the development of your new customer experience and, kind of what becomes the new normal post-pandemic, what do you see as, the processes, in terms of verifying passenger data and health information prior to them even getting, you mentioned embarkation and disembarkation, but what about what happens prior to them even getting to the passenger ship terminal?
Yes, I mean, as I said before, Scott, I think this is going to be, and has already been initiated, a project that will involve a whole ecosystem that is not only us, because prior to reaching the port of embarkation, our guest most probably will take a flight, will drive by car, will take a train. So there are a lot of logistics before reaching the port. And going back to the flight, for example, obviously we are connected to them. So if we will be able to involve all the relevant stakeholders to come to a common agreement on which technology and which protocols and which processes to share personal identity and even health identity data. Don't forget that this is the new request coming up very soon, or is already there. Then we will be successful. And this is going to be a success of the cruise industry, but broadly is going to be a success of the travel industry. So the more we will be able to come to a common format for everybody to agree on which kind of data shared and protocols and technology, the better will be for everybody in the future.
Great. Brandon, we've talked a bit about fraud, but cybersecurity is a broader topic than just the fraud issue. we've got digitization, which is, gives us all these great opportunities. But what are the precautions that are needed to make sure employees and local communities are not left behind? What are some of the key principles, in terms of cybersecurity and how this protects, the guest as well as the employees in these contexts?
Sure. So I think some of the panelists have already commented on the focus the WTTC has had with privacy by design and really considering the privacy principles up front. And cybersecurity is a critical part of privacy, and considering it as part of the development of a capability, development of the use cases, the development of the technologies early is critical, because what often happens is that you might have to make some cyber compromises on the back end if it's not considered up front. So that's one of the the first key things that's already been considered. The second is that I would underscore is the need for consumer choice. While certain options will have mandatory requirements, giving the customer, the guest, the ability to choose while maintaining a secure footprint across those choices will be an important part of this. And finally, an item I would highlight is the data limitation. So while a guest may have numerous aspects of their profile, that doesn't need to be shared with everyone everywhere or stored. And so we often encounter situations where more than the minimum set of data is captured, and we find situations where things like data warehouses, logging systems are often overlooked as unnecessary repositories of personal data.
Good, great. I want to make sure we give the audience a chance to ask other questions in the Q&A facility. Remember to use the Q&A facility if you would like to inject a question into the discussion. Just want to make sure that we get all those asked and answered here by the panel. Do the panelists, I also will invite, if the panelists have any questions for each other, that would be a great opportunity to ask those.
Scott, can I ask a question? Just a little bit here, interaction, if I may. Can we ask the panelists if they can walk us through how do they see is going to be the future of the seamless? And perhaps we should start, from my home, then the airport, the hotel, the cruise. What, as a traveler, should I expect in terms of the interoperability and transferring my data and all of that, so that we can have a good experience? Unfortunately, Diane left, but she probably might say that we should expect like walking into the border without being stopped, because they might compare my photo with their database and be able to do a match or not. But perhaps Miguel can start, and then Chris, and then we have Brandon, and of course Luca. That would be great.
Okay, so in terms of current deployments, what we're doing is we are doing the deployments at the airports, where the stakeholders are the airlines, the airport operator, and in some cases the police authority. So we understand that in terms of the identity management, identification of that person, that service should be more and more being done by the police authorities as a service. That can be done at the airport. It can be done on a much earlier stage. It doesn't have to be when the passenger is queuing. And this is dependent on how the different stakeholders see the seamless solution as representing the steps and the processes they need to implement. So security does not start only at the border control, it starts much earlier. So how much can a document or passport being checked when the passenger is doing his check-in on the check-in counter, or when he's exchanging information on his couch, as was mentioned. So it's more or less the combination and how different stakeholders identify themselves with the whole process. And this is feasible. In Schiphol, for example, the partnership is between the police authorities and the airport towards the passenger. You can do a lot through the check-in, you can do it prior, you can walk through border control, you can go into the lobby, and ultimately you might go to a seamless contactless boarding process. Okay.
Miguel, just to understand for the audience, I show my passport and my documents once, and I can walk to the Schiphol airport and to all the Happy Flow and new technology without having to show my passport multiple times. That's how it's going to be the future, correct? Exactly. Thanks to your solution.
Yeah, and in the moment, at that point of time where you show your documents, that process has to be compliant with the processes of the border control of the police authority, for example, okay? Once you do that, and once this is agreed by different stakeholders, then you can just walk around the airport and walk into the lobby, walk through the boarding process without showing any document at all. And that's where the seamless part is important, not only as an identity management tool, and here we see the authorities with a key element that it's really important that is understood, but you can derive data from that identity and use that data where the passenger or the traveler goes through his car rental, his hotel check-in, and so on and so on. With AirAsia, for example, the project. Sorry, okay.
Thank you, Miguel. Yeah. I think, Scott, I think it would be nice to hear from the rest and run enough time, but this was very valuable, exactly what the question was. Thank you, Miguel.
Yeah, thanks, Miguel.
Can complement.
Yeah, thanks, Miguel. I think we need to get on to the next panel. We're running a little bit late. So thank you to all of you who just participated in panel one. Great discussion and lots of very valuable insights. So thanks to you all. So our next panel, I'm just going to get on with it. It's really focusing on the key enablers. The discussion that we just had was all about the experience, although we talked a few things about the enablers. This next panel is really more about how do we get this to happen, technically, standards-wise, and so on. Our key panelists today are Kevin Michelinen, CEO of PanGM and former acting secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Thank you, Kevin, and sorry for stumbling over your name. Greg Land, head of aviation, hospitality, and travel for IBM's travel division. Gordon Wilson, CEO of World Reach, and Sean Oxley, director of innovation for United Airlines. Thank you all for joining us. And then Celine, I apologize, Celine, you were on the next page here. Celine Canu, who is the head of passenger process and facilitation for IATA. So let's get on with the questions if we can. Then Kevin, I'd like to start with you and the whole question of collaboration between governments and the private sector. And then move on to the question of technology enablers. Tell us why you think it's so important for this collaboration to take place, this public-private partnership kind of collaboration. And then do you have some good examples of where you already see that happening in industry?
Thanks, Scott, and thanks, Gloria and WTTC for your leadership. Really important conversation this morning and afternoon. So, Scott, obviously collaboration is simply fundamental in a sector that involves multiple handoffs and touch points between government entities and private sector entities. Having served on both sides of that coin in the government role, I used to have Diane Sabatino's job about 7 years ago, as well as in the private sector. It's just fundamental. For governments, you need that collaboration with the private sector for their innovation, for their speed, for the reach and really for the investment. And we should remember that it is the mission of those government partners to facilitate and secure that travel. On the private sector side, we really look to government for that standard setting, for the validation, for the traveler protection and standards. But really, I think I want to focus on an issue that came up really at the beginning of the dialogue this morning with Gloria, with Deputy Director General Aniti, and of course, Dax Sabatino. And that's really the identity as a service portion, that critical role of government in fixing a valid, verifiable biometric at the outset of the process. That kind of collaboration and making it available to the private sector really levels the playing field and allows for innovation for airports, airlines, cruise lines, technology providers to really move travelers through that journey. That can be done by validating a company's compliance with policy and really protecting that biometrically validated identity on the government side without necessarily having to release it from a privacy perspective out to private sector partners. So I think that's one area where fixing that identity, making it available as a service to the private sector so that we can then capitalize on that and innovate that process as discussed by Denver CEO from the couch to the destination. That's an essential element, an enabler to use your theme for this side of the panel.
Great, thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate that. Celine, turning to you, the IATA One ID standard is a critical component to biometric digital identity for the airline industry. With your work on IATA One ID, what are you finding governments and or the private sector are most eager to agree and adopt given the impact of COVID and on the industry?
Thank you, Scott, for the question. And it's interesting to look at the evolution of the discussion on this specific point. And if we go back 11 months ago, initially when the big crisis started, we thought that aviation was the most regulated, deregulated industry. It's still true to a certain point, but experience has shown afterwards that countries have progressively closed their borders in an uncoordinated manner with very few visibility for the industry and passengers. It has left us in a situation where it was difficult for states to identify the right decision to take, to coordinate their approach with neighboring countries, with key partners. And so here came also the realization that we need to have some sort of discussion mechanism, platforms to collaborate. And obviously it goes through interstate discussion, collaboration, engagement, but also through the standardization of some elements of technology. And obviously it requires also to look at the current international regulation and see if it's still fit for the purpose. So there's been a tremendous amount of work being done during the last month at national level, obviously, but also at international and European level. And we had Olivier Onidi explained earlier the initiatives in Europe. This is not an isolated case, and we are grateful for regulators. They are looking at accelerating the discussions on the need for standards, be them regulatory standards, but they have also engaged in the discussions on technology. And whereas before it was left to some more forward-looking countries, and we had the example with Diana of the US, which has been great during the last year in embracing technology and biometric recognition. now it became a concern for every single country. And the rationale behind, and which is pushing the adoption of new technologies, is also due to the fact that there are a number of additional procedures that have been put in place during the last month. And we do expect new procedures being put in place. So we need some mechanisms that will allow states to add and remove some of the additional procedures they have. Would they be passenger locator forms, additional ID checks, testing certificates, soon vaccination certificates, or recovery certificates? We are still expecting a number of other processes. So it's important, as we are countries have implemented multi-layered measures to address the COVID situation. Those layers will need to be removed at some point in time. So technology is really helpful there. And obviously, we need to have a coordinated approach among countries, as we see that one element that prevents passengers from moving from one country to the other is not just the absence of flight or authorization, is also the lack of confidence they have that they meet the measures that are required at destination. So in order to bring clarity for everyone, passengers, the industry, and states themselves, it's important to increase this level of standardization. And we are, there are lots of efforts being put in that direction, even if we are not there yet.
Thank you very much, Celine. Sorry, somebody put me on mute. I really appreciate that perspective. Sean, I want to turn to you and look at, kind of what you've been doing at United. Obviously international travel relies on, very much a multilateral kind of consensus-driven set of standards, and, maintaining trust between countries is critical. What are some of the critical components that you see to ensure interoperability as we, potentially deal with, various standards? And what challenges can we expect when we start to incorporate health data and, the kind of vaccine certifications and recovery certifications and so forth that Celine mentioned? What are some of the challenges that we can expect as we incorporate that into the standard setting process?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thanks for the question. As we think about the kind of critical components for interoperability and the need for harmonization and standard setting, I think three things kind of jump out to me. One is data security. So this is individual personal information, and that's always going to be of the utmost importance for our travelers. One, in ensuring that we can protect it, but two, in building confidence in these systems and relying on this as kind of the new normal as we lean into things. So I think kind of setting the table stakes standards for the adequate collection, storage, and transmission of this type of information across all of the involved stakeholders, that's going to continue to be a critical component here. And the more we can drive towards that, as I mentioned, kind of the table stakes to play at this, the closer we're going to get to having a solution that works as broadly as we want it to. The second component there is kind of the consistency or the ease of recognition and usability. Having the ability to make this information look and feel and appear the same for any provider or any stakeholder who needs to access it is only going to make this easier to implement and lean into. We're going to have a growing number of parties that need to recognize, authenticate, and use this. And so making that easy to replicate and do over time is also going to help make this feasible. And then I think too, there's just kind of there has to be a sense of flexibility and collaboration. We've talked about it with the public-private sector. We've talked about all of the different players that are in this space. It's going to continue to grow and evolve. Providers are going to offer this in a different mean. Customers are going to have different interests and priorities. And it's going to be on us as the parties that are delivering this service to work together and mold our solution to meet those expectations and kind of make sure we're evolving to make this a better experience overall. And then on the second portion, as you talk about health information, we know this is becoming increasingly important for travelers and for airlines to continue to facilitate and allow travel. The privacy concerns, this kind of goes back to data security, but the stakes go even higher as you start to look at medical information.
Yeah.
There's privacy implications between what providers can tell us, what passengers provide. And there are certain ways you could look at it that say, if we as an airline had access to every passenger's medical information, we could theoretically put together a really easy to use solution. But that's not the reality of how that works, right? So we're forced to figure out what the right level of ownership and access to this information is. Do we work with a third party? Are we comfortable ingesting some of this information? But that's something we're faced with right now. And I don't know that we've quite figured out what that end state solution is going to be. I think vaccinations are a really good example. At first, we thought test results were going to be the way of the world. I think they still will, but vaccinations, as they're becoming more prevalent, does that make us reconsider our stance? Are we maybe okay taking on the liability to retain that vaccination record? It's a question we'll continue to cope with. And I think the other big differentiator as you look at the medical side is authentication issues. It's not test results, vaccination results, they all don't look and feel the same. It's very different from a passport or a driver's license or something like that. So until there is some sort of standardization there, we'll be forced with trying to figure out, how do we understand these forms? How do we translate them? What are the critical components? And then are the providers that we're seeing these results from, do those meet the actual requirements that we need as we look at these tests? So it's certainly been an exciting few months trying to figure all that out with the new implications with medical records and things like that.
Yeah, I know certainly in the US we have HIPAA compliance standards, which are complicated, and I can imagine that each and every country probably has its own version or variant thereof. So thanks a lot, Sean. Very good insights. Yeah. Want to switch over to Gordon from WorldReach. ICAO is developing standards for a digital travel credential, a form of digital identity that can be derived from existing credentials such as a passport. And that's obviously a key enabler for traveler identity and represents a unique opportunity to pilot new solutions, taking advantage of those standards. Can you elaborate a bit on why the DTC standard is critical to the success of digital identities in travel and transportation and travel and tourism, and why now is a particularly good time to pilot these kinds of solutions? Gordon?
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate your question, and glad to be with you here today. So the DTC itself is built on 30 plus years of work from the ICAO machine readable travel document and the standards that are in there. And those standards underpin passports globally, e-passports, but also national citizen IDs, as we heard earlier today, being issued, and other forms of electronic IDs, such as the UK's biometric resident permit. So as Scott mentioned, that how do we get to these standards and how do we depend on it? Well, we already have a huge leg up. And the DTC is part of already the One ID, the WTTC's recommended practices. So it's not another version, it is actually already embedded globally in many of the recommendations. So why is that important? Well, you have to understand that digital identity is new and it's all about getting critical mass and usability so we can have that readily available. So immediately, we have the ability to generate a digital travel credential based on the standard that's already been approved by ICAO in November. And we can have potentially 1 billion people globally who could have a digital travel credential in the next year or two. So that's huge in digital identity. Nothing comes close to this. Of course, countries like India and China with the population can do something in country, but we don't have anything close to this in terms of a global digital identity that's readable, trusted, and verifiable by many parties. So that DTC, because it can be derived, you don't have to go to a place to get one. You can use smartphones and other devices to generate it, allows us to take a trusted digital credential that can be verified globally, and use that as an underpinning for seamless travel and other uses. So consider for a moment the discussions we've heard today about what would be like if we didn't have this. So here we are in the middle of the crisis, trying to figure out how do we create a common health or vaccine certificate, and the plethora of technologies. It's difficult. It's a waste of resources. Can we even achieve interoperability? Well, we already have all of that with the DTC and the structures behind it. So we can stand on the shoulders of many people for the work in the last 30 years and thank them that we have this as a strong basis. So why now? Well, seamless travel has fundamentally used biometrics and digital ID as foundational elements. COVID makes safe travel imperative, and digital ID is a key element to helping safe travel and to do it seamlessly. Less passing of books, less time in lines. So now's the time to do the proof of concepts and pilots in 21 to support safe travel and the readiness to scale up. So we're working with organizations like Canada Border Services and airports in Toronto that will be launching pilots in the next month or two for walk-through seamless borders. We're doing the same thing with Eurostar and our partners iProve at the arrival for London St. Pancras. So we're getting ready now so we can scale as volume returns, not scale after volume returns, but scale as it returns. And I think that's critical. The DTC allows us to do that. And now's the window when people have a bit of time before the volume comes back to do it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate that, Gordon. One thing you mentioned is, scaling now versus scaling later. Just real quick question on that. Is that something that is, challenging for travel companies given the downturn in their financial situations?
Yeah, it is for sure. But for governments, they have resources that can be used to assist in pilots now where they're not as busy handling border situations, for example, the travelers. For the travel companies, sure, traditionally they might develop technology themselves, and there's a lot of people on layoffs and furlough. And of course, when the operations come back, they're going to need resources. But this is where I think the technology companies can assist now, where we're not as impacted by COVID, to offer services to the travel industry on a fee-for-use basis, or think of it as seamless travel as a service. So it would require less investment at the front end of technology, but allow the companies to start implementation early and get a 1 to 2 year head start.
Great, that's very interesting. Thank you, Gordon. Switching over to you, Greg, I think we've had we've heard about ongoing discussions around the new concept of a health pass. And, is there anything about the, digital traveler identity that really helps us drive, health certification requirements in the post-COVID era? And how can biometrics kind of, sort of glue these things together in some way?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Gloria. We've been engaged with WTTC since the inception of the Seamless Traveler Journey initiative in 2017. And so it was good that we were engaged in this already and saw how this was going to progress before the pandemic. I think now with the need for digital health information, it just accelerates the whole idea of digital travel credentials, but then couple that with where we are right now in the recovery process and travelers wanting everything to be completely touchless. I think when you couple the authentication of digital health information with a digital ID, with biometrics, or maybe even simply starting on a mobile device with biometrics, I think it just helps give the traveler a little more comfort and security in keeping everything touchless. So when you couple all that with biometrics, I think it just kind of brings it all together very nicely. Now, we built our back-end system for Digital Health Pass on blockchain for a couple of reasons. And it is some of the things that Sean and Gordon just touched on. It's the inherent security benefits in a blockchain platform, as well as the ease of onboarding network partners. We've got to build a broad global network of healthcare providers and travel verifiers. And the quickest way to do that at global scale, we feel like, is on a blockchain platform. But we've been doing digital ID work for several years. And we deployed it on blockchain initially because of the abilities with decentralized digital ID and self-sovereign ID solutions. And what that means is the holder, or in this case, the traveler, has complete control of their data. So when you talk about meeting HIPAA requirements or GDPR requirements or other data privacy requirements, those benefits on blockchain make it easy to where it's in complete control of the traveler. They can determine who sees what. And back to Sean's point, it also helps us keep everything completely opaque to the verifier or the airline or the hotel or the cruise line. So all those things together, coupled with biometrics, just really to the whole nature of seamless, makes all of this so very seamless, but we can do it in a way that the traveler also feels safe and secure. Now, I also want to reflect back on something that Chris said about some of the digital travel ID work that they're doing at Denver, because we're seeing this across a lot of airlines, cruise lines, and other travel providers, where everyone's starting to work on their own proprietary digital travel ID. And I think, you know, we need to be careful there. I think we do need to look to these DTC standards and others and make sure that we're working in concert across the industry so that these things can all talk to each other. But that's one of the other benefits of building this on blockchain, because when you think about global scale and interoperability, it's an easy way to bring all these things together, because with blockchain at the center of this, or at the core of this, it's easy to provide interoperability between platforms and all the way down to frontline systems. And so I just want to make sure that we all keep that in mind as well, because we've got to make sure that we are using standards for even the digital travel ID component of this, so that these platforms can talk to each other. Yes, we've got a platform in the market. It's being used already for return to work, and we're working with airlines, hotels, and cruise lines to get it in place for return to travel. But we're not so blind that we think it's going to be the only platform. There's going to be numerous platforms around the world. We're already seeing some countries create their own proprietary digital ID systems, not only for travel, but for other aspects of domestic movement around their country or other government agency uses. So we've got to be able to, in an interoperable way, leverage those local systems as well. And so I think the focus of this on interoperability, I think, is critical, but I think all these elements can come together and truly make the process seamless for the traveler.
Great, thanks a lot, Greg. Appreciate that. Going to go and kind of back to some of the other panelists. Kevin, let's start with you. Over the past year, we've seen obviously an urgent need to restore traveler confidence and ensure that people are safe and secure in their travel experience. This has certainly accelerated a lot of different conversations regarding the use of data and contactless solutions in order to kind of facilitate that. How do you see these things coming together, and what are some of the potholes that governments and industry should be sure to steer clear of?
Yeah, it's a good question, Scott. And I think Greg's points just now on the challenges with interoperability and different approaches to digital identity are really just compounded when we add the health credential aspect. And I think Sean spoke to this as well. What we're seeing right now is countries really insisting on a clear and recent test or eventually evidence of a vaccination. And I know we're still looking at how transmissible COVID might be after someone is vaccinated as well, which is another challenge. But that takes it from a complicated stakeholder map of governments, travel industry providers, to now public health authorities, both global, national, and I think is really important to recognize state and local or province and local public health authorities. So everybody now has a say. And so when we're trying to get to being able to digitize a proof of a health kind of passport, if you will, someone's had a recent test, they've had a vaccination, you're now dealing with a much greater stakeholder map of entities that have to validate whether that test was acceptable in a certain jurisdiction, whether that vaccine has the parameters that public health authority needs. So that's going to create challenges, but I do think the progress that the industry has made, working with governments on the digital ID and biometric accessibility, that can be leveraged. That blockchain-enabled type of platform that Greg is speaking to can be leveraged to add the health credential. We just need some global collaboration on the health standards and some identification of key tests, key vaccines that are going to be recognized across borders. So that's a pothole I see, but I do think the solutions we're talking about as a team today in these panels are the ones that are going to enable that next step on the health side as well. And you do see that happening on an individual country basis. We just need to standardize it globally. And that's why I think the WTTC push for that international conversation, G7 and beyond, is so helpful.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Sean, want to turn to you and ask you what's sort of the next steps within the aviation community and airlines and airports in particular that's going to get the traveler over the hump here and get them back on planes and traveling again?
Yeah, I think so. One, I think everyone on this call can appreciate that travel pre-pandemic had its own stresses and can shake traveler confidence as it is. So it's never been tougher for travelers to figure out what they need to do and how they need to do it. So I think the things that we focused on at an airline are some of the concepts we heard about with this traveler readiness and pulling as much of the work and stress and thought out of that day of travel as we can. And so I think it's equal parts education, but also helping them run through those steps to prep for that day of travel. And I'll take a shameless plug here for our Travel Readiness Center that went active this Monday. That's something that our digital technology team built to help with understanding COVID requirements and giving passengers an opportunity to upload documents ahead of time. That's the foundation, and that was the core problem statement we were trying to solve with this enhancement. But that serves as the foundation of building into it, right? Can we start to invite people to register their biometrics, opt into these things before day of travel, and then kind of entice them to use these experiences? I think the second component for us is creating that customer experience that is easy to use and inviting. I think it's on us to promote the merits of digital identification and biometrics and things like that. But if ultimately it's more troublesome for the customer to use something when they get to the airport, they're going to walk away from it. So I think it's this readiness and preparation component, but then also making it a really good and inviting experience so that people want to use this, as we think this is the way of the future.
Great. Thanks a lot, Sean. Gordon, turning to you, we've talked earlier today about public-private partnerships and government policy and just kind of the time lag in getting those things through the process. What do you see as the roadmap, and what can we as an industry be doing to make progress now and kind of give governments the impetus to move things forward faster?
Thanks, Scott. Let me start first with just the WTTC guide on safe and seamless travel journey that was introduced at the start of the session today by Gloria. I think there's a lot of people, including many people on the panels today, who participated in this. In the section 3, it gives you an outline of the roadmap in a general sense. It divided into timeframes, sort of near term, 2 years out, midterm to 5 years, long term beyond that. But it's also segmented by sector. So government and the things that they can work on, travel providers, and then technology enablers, as well as the traveler itself, who we need to focus on education and adoption of this. So there's a great amount of information there. It's summarized in the document. I can't cover all the details of it, but what I'd like to do is focus on the near-term items and the recovery phase that we talked about. So alignment in education is just alignment with government, the sectors that are happening now in some of the examples on the panel, and education, getting it out in our industry here in travel, as well as in government and the various groups that government interacts in, to put it on the agenda, as Gloria has done already very well. And then integrating, looking at the recovery plans and saying, where can we put in safe and seamless journey into those recovery plans now? And how do we start to implement pilots? I mean, we have to recognize, which I think most of us do who've been working on this, that touchless and safe travel is very much interlinked with seamless travel. And if that's the case, we should be implementing safe travel along with seamless travel in your plans. Start with the small pilots, as I said earlier, build that as volume comes back, and then collaborate across government and the travel sector, as we see instances like Denver today is doing fabulously, and others have done, as a way to scale it up. So really the key is, if we can take advantage of this window to build it into our plans, to build it into the recovery processes, we will be able to scale it up as volume of travelers come back. And we'll look back in 2 years from now, and in fact, COVID will be a big accelerator, just as it's been in the private sector for commerce. It can be a big advantage for those who take advantage of doing it, and you'll be a year or two ahead of competition if you implement now.
Well, that's interesting, Gord. Just kind of as a tag on to that, do you see this as being something that, future industry support legislation such as the CARES Act or things like that should make explicit funding for travel companies for this stuff?
I think there's great mechanisms, whether we look at R&D funds. UK has been great with UK Innovate supporting the Eurostar project. There's little seed funds that could be really important right now where money is tight, particularly in the travel sector. Little bits of seed funding that can basically cover some out-of-pocket costs to get these pilots going would be very valuable at the moment. So if there's an opportunity to create these or utilize existing programs, whether they be research and development or travel acceleration programs, this is an excellent time for government to put a little bit of seed money there.
Great, thank you, Gordon. Greg, we've talked a lot about, airlines and in the earlier session about cruise and hotels, but I'm interested in your perspective. What's the end-to-end approach that sort of stitches this stuff together across air and non-air in terms of standards, right? How, we know that IATA has standards, we know that, ICAO has standards, but are there things that we can do that bridges all the different modes of travel and transport so that we have kind of one cohesive set of standards?
Yeah, and I'll reflect back on the comments about interoperability as part of that, Scott, because we do want to work with the principle of you enroll in this once and you can use it everywhere, right? So whether you enroll through a loyalty program with an airline or you initially enroll through a third-party program of some kind, we want them to all be interoperable. And so it starts with core standards like W3C standards for verifiable credentials. That's utilized across all industries using digital ID, but then also getting down to some specific standards for digital IDs that Gordon referenced as well. But then also getting to some common APIs. So when you look at the non-air side of things, we're also active with Open API and Open Travel Alliance, which drives a lot of the standards for data and API with non-air travel providers as well. So I think looking to organizations like that to be a part of this and make sure that they're also driving standards through the data models and the APIs that they roll out, because they get pretty high adoption in the non-air space, especially with rail and cruise and hotels. And so I think making sure we include folks like that is also important. But then you've also got to look to, we're seeing a lot of, third-party digital wallets pop up and ledgers and things like that. All those have to have interoperability as well. So it does have to be a broad cross-industry play, because I think Sean mentioned, as we get to vaccines, that's going to be a lifestyle choice. Today, we get tested for a specific trip, before and after a specific trip. But going forward, I'm going to get vaccinated as a lifestyle choice. And I may need to use that verification information to enter an amusement park or a sports arena, or even to go back to work. And so that's another reason why we've got to make sure we're using industries that we don't develop in a bubble that are just proprietary to the aviation industry or just the travel industry, but that we are using these broader digital credential standards. So it's interoperability not only across the travel industry, but across that broader society as well.
Great. Thanks. Super useful perspective, Greg. Celine, we just heard about interoperability and the need to have that to make this whole experience really work for the traveler. What are some of the key factors that you think, ensure a successful approach for the travel industry more broadly? I think Greg mentioned APIs, you mentioned, W3C standards, and kind of a recognition that, there should be a seamless way of sharing this information. What are your constituents in the airline industry seeing about that, and how do they, plan to be a part of that?
Thank you, Scott. I would say it's difficult to add anything after Greg because he covered it all. And thank you because it was said in a very eloquent way. The aspect of data privacy also brought by Sean earlier are critical also to the acceptance of the system for passengers and for lobbying groups as well who are looking after those interests, and rightly so. We need to monitor also the best practices in terms of information sharing and is there any data stored, and if it's the case, where, by who, and how. So and there's this whole trust framework which needs to be built with the users of the system. Now, in the air transport industry, and I would say in the environment of cross-border operations, we need to abide to certain set of legislation. And to Gordon's point earlier, the DTC has been brought forward by ICAO in replacement in the future of the current electronic passport. So, and it's a critical element of it as it allows the introduction of the passport in the digital wallet. One point that is worth mentioning is that ICAO has planned an evolution of the DTC, the Digital Traveler Credential. So whereas the first version is currently a virtual component derived from a physical component, the electronic passport, the last version of the DTC is foreseeing to be a virtual component that will further be tokenized. So, and that makes a difference. It means that states will directly issue a virtual passport. And then a passenger will be able to introduce them in their mobile phone or any token that is accepted or used for the purpose. And so right from the beginning, you have the security link to this virtual component, which currently is not necessarily the case with the first version of it. The level of security is a bit lower, but as we move forward with further versions, it will strengthen also the confidence we can have in the document. And it's very important as we are looking at cross-border operations, we want to passengers to be ready to fly and have all the already have the entry requirement for the country of destination checked in before they even depart. It will reduce the risk for airlines to have passenger deemed inadmissible on arrival, and it's a big concern and an issue for them. And it will bring the confidence that passengers are looking for. They are currently in an environment where they don't know which paper they need, if it's a paper or if it's a form, if they need to fill some information on the portal. There is a scattered approach to it. So with that in mind, we've developed OneID, and which is a concept. We are trialing also a concrete solution, which is the IATA Travel Pass. And there we provide passengers with the rule of the destinations where they go, and they have the list of the requirements, and it brings this level of confidence that they need to be able to travel. So we are all in this boat. We are having solutions that offer open standards. It's critical, we heard it. We need to include elements that are part of the regulation, but at the meantime, we need to base our principle on self-sovereign identity, on verifiable credentials, because there are other elements that do not necessarily pertain to ICAO or the travel process, and still will be needed. The test certificates is a good example.
Thank you, Celine. Thank you. Thanks to all of our panelists. I was going to ask the audience for additional questions, but frankly, we're right at the top of the hour. So I want to thank all of you for sharing your great perspectives and you know, giving us all some really good food for thought and in terms of how we interact with other participants in our industry, as well as with our, you know, our local governments and how we advance this agenda. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Gloria and Helena and all the team from WTTC for convening this important industry body. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And this is recorded and will be used as we explain and will be available as well for other participants that didn't make it. Thank you, Scott, and thank you to all the speakers. We appreciate the hard work. Thank you.
Bye-bye.